Good afternoon. We are ready to absorb some more thoughts. Let us begin by taking some questions. I can see that some of the questions were already answered during the session, but then they required some more discussions. So we'll first begin sequentially as the questions had appeared day-wise during the lecture sessions. And then we'll also ask you to ask us if there are some questions remaining that you could not have asked during the program, during the lectures. So the first question that was raised is from Professor Haribandi Lakshmi's talk. And this question was why the theories cited are mostly Western. How about the Indian tradition as well as contemporary Indian theories? Further, what about Asian thoughts? So this is a very interesting and relevant question because it has occurred in several disciplines in the same context. So we have noticed that many of the social sciences disciplines encounter this kind of a question of Western theory. There are two or three interesting observations about this thought. Number one, no one talks about Western theories in science and technology. We are not very bothered about importing Western ideas when we are dealing with science and technology. We are concerned only when it comes to social sciences and when it comes to literary theories and sometimes linguistics also. I do not want to endorse the view that we should blindly follow any theory, whether it is Western or Eastern, but then it is an observation that the questions are repeatedly asked in the areas of social sciences and humanities and not so much in science and technology. Number one. The second observation that I would like to make here is it really true that the theories that we are discussing and we study are Western in nature, or that theories and ideas cannot be bound to a geographical location or a geographical entity. So that way, these are basically ideas which cannot be said purely Western or Eastern in nature. So that way, I think our answers would be slightly better. Then we should also look at the purpose of asking this question. The purpose of asking this question is that sometimes we have blindly accepted the theories that we found in textbooks, the things that we found in printed form, and things that were present in our syllabus. So when we studied a course and we found a particular theory or discussion in our textbook or syllabus, we believed them, and then we started practicing or we started training our actions based on those theories. So it looked like those theories have some kind of, or they have caused some kind of a deviation of our action from what should have been very relevant to the local conditions or local thoughts. So that way, the objective of asking this question is relevant, but at the same time, there is a word of caution for the two observations I made. Number one, it is very important for us to see whether we are concerned about Western theories in science and technology also or not. And the answer may be inclined towards no more than yes. And then, is it very justifiable that the theories are geographically bound? They should not be geographically bound. Rather, they should be discussed or evaluated on the merit of the thought and the convenience they can offer. We also have another question which is related to translation of ghazal from one language to another. And the question from Manisha asks the expert, is it possible to follow the sense, meaning, rhyme, and sound? What do you think about it in the context of translation of ghazal? There are a couple of things that we should take into consideration again. The first thing is ghazal is a form of poetry. So we need to understand that this will fall under literary translation and translation of verses or poetic creations, which has its own challenges, because apart from the meaning that is conveyed by the author, by the poet, there is also rhyme and metrical composition to be followed. So this enhances the challenge, but then various translators and poets themselves have proved that this is doable. This is something that one can achieve with a lot of practice, number one. Then in several cases, we have noticed that the translated version of a poem at times loses the aesthetic pleasure that you get in reading it in the source text. And this is something that we all have encountered when we study regional literature in a given language, when we all study literature. So when we were also studying class 10th level textbooks or class 9th level textbooks, we would be exposed to poetry or prose from writers representing diverse parts of the country, and the text would be available in English or Hindi. For that matter, we can very well say that these were all translated forms, and at times it would appear to be very it would be lacking interest. It would be looking very dry. So that can be an indicator to translators not being able to maintain the aesthetic aspects, the metrical aspects of the creation in the source text. But then it is achievable, and there are several other poets and translators who have rendered the work quite efficiently without a problem. We also have a question from Prashant Kumar. It says, isn't too much knowing about translation can hamper the translation's originality? Here I would like to inform Prashant that in translation, the idea of originality is very questionable. It is very controversial in nature now, especially in the context of modern theories. We notice that now the work of translation creates originality or original text, so that way all our text in one language and text in another language, text from source language, text in the target language, and things like that. So knowing about theories, as we have discussed earlier, can make you more alert. It can increase your alertness and help you solve some problems that you are facing while translating. So this may be helpful, and these theories are to be considered as some kind of a launch pad, some kind of help. Your work cannot totally depend on theories, because nobody first reads the theory and then goes into translation activity. Rather, you get into the activity, face problems, then read how somebody else has solved the problem and what somebody else has written about these problems. So these are questions from day 5, and there is one more question in the same set by Prashant Kumar. He says, can we really say that translating the old norms really match the idea of the current scenario? The change in the word paradigm and word meaning gradually has affected the way of translating the old Vedic language and the words. This question also is similar to the one that Prashant has asked before. In fact, this kind of a question gains a lot of relevance in the context of translation of scriptures and holy texts. So the texts that we give a lot of importance, especially religious texts or holy scriptures, these are texts where you have very little liberty to modify anything, and if meaning is not conveyed fully, it can be treated as blasphemous. So that would be an unacceptable activity, that would be an unacceptable commodity. So therefore, there is a lot of seriousness given to maintaining the not only the content but also the style, tone, texture, everything of the source text. So it is a difficult task again, but then achievable. And the best examples are the most translated works in the world are say Bible or Gita or other holy scriptures, Quran and things like that, which are like all holy scriptures of immense value, and there is no possibility of tinkering with the content of those texts. So therefore it is challenging, but people have achieved them in not one or two but several languages. I guess Bible is available in more than 4 to 500 languages. If it's available in so many or 4 to 500 languages, that means the task was achievable. Is there any remark one would like to give here on the 4 questions that we have taken up so far? Any participant? If not, then we'll move on to day 6. And on day 6, we have Sneha Gupta wanting to know something about universal phonetic alphabet, and she has raised an interesting question because on several occasions we come to know about the invention slash development of a script that can be called global or universal. In this context, the views of linguists is very important. It is very important to know what linguists say about speech, script, and writing system. Let me tell you all that it is possible to write any language in any script. So if I want, I can write any language of the world using Devanagari script. I can write any language of the world using Roman script with slight adjustments, with slight incorporations, with some adjustments in the number of letters or shapes of the letters. So that way, a script is a kind of a technology, or alphabet is a technology that enables you to write any message in any language. Now what happens is script also becomes a cultural commodity, and once it is a cultural commodity, a group would show affiliation to it, and that is why it would use it. The other groups would want to develop their own script. There are several scripts available, maybe around 200 scripts are available in the world, but you have around 7,000 languages. So when we have 7,000 languages and only 200 or 300 scripts available, there is a possibility, or it's very certain that most languages of the world do not have scripts. Now here the question is about universal phonetic script, and then Sneha had further asked whether it is similar to IPA, and Latika also suggested that it is similar to IPA. But let me tell you that the universal phonetic script that was developed is not related to IPA. That was actually in reaction to IPA, and that in a way questioned why IPA should be promoted, because IPA was considered to be an extension of Latin Greek symbols that were prevalent in alphabet. So there are several important points to be noted here, which will be difficult to discuss in details here, but I would like to tell you that script is a set of letters, and it can be of different types. Latika further has a question: is there any training available for IPA? There are some provisions available. I do not say proper training, because unless you do a phonetics course, unless you train your ears in recognizing individual sounds, phonemes, and vowels and consonants, you may not be able to make best use of it. So that way a training or any other provision would be helpful only when you are able to train your ears in identifying the sounds. There are some provisions I said. One is you can download an app called Text to IPA. So if you download that app in your mobile and you type up a small sentence of English, maybe my name is Latika, and then you click on convert to IPA, it would instantly convert your text to IPA. So if you click on that, it would instantly change the text into IPA. But then that works very well with the Roman letters, and that works very well with English writing system. But when it comes to other languages, for instance, Indian languages written in Devanagari or In case of Roman letters and English text, it is almost 100% accurate. You have the choice to select British pronunciation or American pronunciation, and based on that, it would give you the result. You also have the option to select whether you want to pronounce the word final ra sound, or you want to delete it as it is a practice in English speaking countries. You also have option to select primary stress and yes, Kedar, it is a received pronunciation, and it also has the option to apply primary stress and secondary stress. Now, this is not just doable on mobile, it can also be done on your computers. So you can download a particular application called there is one interesting application which works on computers, where you'll get some kind of an interface where you type your source in English, and then you press F5, and the moment you press F5, it converts into IPA. So no, a database of IPA is difficult. You'll have to consult phoneticians, and there are quite a few in number. You can contact some people in linguistics departments. I know some of them. If you wish, we can write back to you some names. You can contact them directly and get your things done. But then there are also opportunities through workshops where people receive training in IPA. But often I notice that these workshops are conducted for linguists who are introduced to this IPA system right at the beginning of their course. So in the first semester itself, they get acquainted with IPA, and in subsequent courses, they make use of the alphabet, and that is why they are quite comfortable with this script. So when they open a dictionary, they are able to follow the pronunciation which is placed just adjacent to the word entry. So for them, it's not difficult. But for the general people, some symbols are common. They are identical with other English or Roman letters that they know. But some symbols they may not be able to follow. That is why they are not able to read the pronunciation available in the dictionaries, even though they are able to have some acquaintance with some of the characters there. If required, we can plan that for those who are not doing linguistics and wish to get into or wish to develop their skills in IPA. This is something that we all can do. Vagira has done functional English. In functional English classes, you will definitely be introduced to English phonetics, and in that course, you must have seen the symbols for English sounds. So you can learn IPA, but let me just give you a word of caution that the sounds and symbols that you were introduced in your functional English courses are relevant to English language, whereas linguists would be studying general sounds. When they are studying phonetics, they are not concerned with any language, any particular language. Rather, they are concerned with all languages and all sounds. Even though there are 7,000 languages, there are not 7,000 sounds. The sounds are fewer in number, maybe 300 to 400 only. And using those sounds in a form of a set, every language is making its own words and sound patterns. So that is why there are more common sounds between two languages than uncommon sounds. You take any pair of two very uncommon, unrelated languages, and you'll notice that there are more number of common sounds than uncommon sounds. These discussions are very interesting, and I can go on, but then I think I should move on to the next question. But yes, there can be an offer for those who are interested in IPA. We can plan 1 or 2 days workshop on IPA, or longer workshops also on IPA if you would be interested. There are very well placed experts within CIL and connected with CIL who can train you in handling the symbols and schemes of IPA. Not very difficult. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . There is a question from Ashraf. It says, shall we transcribe all the world languages to IPA so that an IPA scientist phonetician can read all that languages easily? This would be a great thing to happen, but at the same time, there can be disagreements. There are people who oppose this also, although there are more people who agree on this, because IPA has some reasons for why they have assigned a particular symbol to a particular sound. The guiding principle for IPA is that one symbol should be assigned to a particular sound, and one sound should have only one symbol. So there should not be mixing of sounds and symbols. It should not be that a particular symbol, for instance, my name Tariq can be written as Tariq. It can be written as Thariq. It can be written as Tarik. So there are several ways in which one would like to write within India. Tareek. So there are several ways. Now this would be confusing. So in order to make it uniform, IPA provides one symbol, one sound kind of a correspondence. But then there are problems even within IPA. This is something that we all notice from time to time. There are overlappings. Some symbols, if you click on them and you want to hear how they sound, you'll feel that two symbols are sounding similar. And at times there are superscripts and subscripts. When superscripts and subscripts are to be used, then what was wrong with our own scripts that we know, if superscript and subscripts were to be used there also? So such things are there. Shall we develop an Indian version to such an idea to transcribe all Indian languages? NTM can take an attempt. No, Ashraf, in fact, the availability of so many forms, so many scripts and universal alphabet and IPA-like things has occurred because everyone wanted to develop a kind of an integrated system, whereas we have to agree to something that integrates the entire set of alphabet available. So that way, if we start developing one more just for India, then there would be something just for Asia, and then there would be something just for America or Europe, then there would be a problem. So what we can instead do is we can improvise what is available instead of fighting with or fighting for a very individualized system. Rather, we should go for something that takes together every language. So that way, there was an attempt earlier in India also, something called WX notation system. W, the letter W of English, and X, the letter X of English alphabet. So WX notation was developed to represent all sounds of Indian languages. But again, what about the languages of the Northeast, where you have intonation, where you have tones and tonemes? So those things became a problem. Then there are several other scripts. You'll come across scripts like Navlipi, Mahalipi, Saraswati Lipi, Vishwalipi, and Akshay Lipi. So many lipis people have prepared just to claim that their lipi is able to, or their script is able to write any language in the world. But the point remains, you can write any language in any script that you want. All that you need is some adjustment here and there. So that way, we have to understand that speech and writing are not one and the same. Writing is some kind of a representation, graphical representation of the speech. All right. I think we should move to the next question by Pali Sarkar, and her question is, if someone wants to learn Esperanto from India, which route should we choose? This is a very interesting question, because her question assumes the context of adult learners, adult second language learners. For children, route is not a problem, because you expose them to any language or any number of languages, and they will be able to pick up. But in case of adults, the knowledge that they have about their first language or second language, or the number of languages that they know, comes at times as an interference. So if you want to learn a new language at the moment, you may feel some kind of an interference from the languages that you are already aware of. That is why most linguists are poor learners of any language, and they find it difficult to learn a language because their consciousness about the rules interferes in their learning itself. The moment they see a new set of data, they become more analytical than applying it for learning language and gaining skills. So that is something very interesting. But for the second language learners also, you'll be surprised to see that your knowledge which was appearing as an interference, your consciousness about the rules which appeared as interference to the new system, also has an advantageous perspective. That is, you will be quicker at picking words. So in case of second language learners, vocabulary learning is fast. There is some kind of advantage, because when you are exposed to some set of vocabulary, you are already trained to develop words also. So within that language you can develop words, and in the next language also you will be trying to establish similar kind of mechanism. That's very important. One way to go about it, which I have noticed in several people, those who are polyglot and those who are very gifted in terms of number of languages they speak, I have noticed that they adopt the scheme of writing. So they immediately note down all the symbols or sounds or letters, and then they start experimenting. That's one thing. Second thing that they do is identifying the minimal pairs. Like if they hear a particular word, 2 or 3 words, then they would like to experiment with those words and create newer words, and ask the users, those who are native speakers of that language, whether this exists in your language or not, whether this is meaningful or not. So that way their ability to experiment helps them a lot. So in that case, I think for Esperanto, maybe your acquaintance with languages in which its booklets are available would be helpful. So if Esperanto booklets are available in English, you should be able to follow basic English at least. So that way it can be learned by an intervening language or a link language, which would help whatsoever. That way you can also adopt other mechanisms, like you might have noticed some social attitudes and other motivations also help people learn language very fast. Some communities are very good at that. They go from place to place and they are able to adopt the language of the local areas very fast, and that's a matter of surprise and confusion for the linguists. Let us move to day 8, and here we have a question related to Dr. Gitanjali's talk, and it is inquiring, please explain the concept that Travelogue is itself a translated version once more. Yes, I also agree with the view that Dr. Gitanjali had expressed. Travelogue is a form of translation, because it is a representation of what one has experienced. So it is writing what one has experienced, and looks like not a translation. But then if you see it from the third type of translation, from the perspective of third type of translation, which was intersemiotic, or something which is not related to intra or interlinguistic, then you will be able to understand that it is a kind of a translation where action or experiences are given words or language. Then there is a question from Anshuman Bora, and it says, what kind of care is needed while translating from languages without a script to languages with a script? Are we required to think of an alternative paradigm of translation for oral cultures? This is a very serious question Anshuman has asked, and this is something that a researcher would encounter on several occasions, especially those who are working in the area of literary studies. There are several oral literatures available which are not written, and if that were to be written, that first instance in itself is an act of translation. And then even before they are written, one should accept the fact that they are available in a translated form, and that is why oral literature would not be appropriate term. Rather, it should be oral literatures, because most of those literatures are plural in number. They are not similar. What happens in their case is from generation to generation, from place to place, those have transcended from one set of people to another set of people. So when they have kept transcending from people to people, there have been additions, deletions, modifications, several activities that have applied on those texts. And then now today we are in a position to document them or archive them or digitize them or store them on different platforms. So that way we are in a position to record them, and we should be aware of the fact that the way they are available today is already a translated version. Then when we are translating them further in a script, then a lot of carefulness is required to retain the original local flavor and not to approximate anything. In this case, there are often instances of approximation, and often there are instances of hypercorrection. So if you look at a song where the singer is pronouncing something in a very local regional style, and you feel that in the textbook you have read that word's pronunciation or that expression's pronunciation in a different way, and you want to correct it when you are writing, it would not be appropriate. So in this case, a word of caution would be to avoid any kind of standardization and allow all kinds of regional local flavors, so that its spirit and context are retained to the extent possible. Of course, when you are writing, there would be some loss and gain, but then attempt should be made to avoid any kind of standardization and or refinement. Then we have a question from SB Biradar: how to translate jokes into target language. When I saw this question that day, I was tempted to answer this question then and there, because this is one area where I take a lot of interest, and my own specialization was also humor studies. I did my PhD on linguistic and cognitive aspects of verbal humor, and jokes are a form of verbal humor. So I have also discussed and written papers on the aspects of translation of jokes. Let me, before answering your question fully, let me just tell everyone present here what happens in case of jokes and other instances of humor, whether it is joke or it is satire or irony or memes or any other form of humor. It can be sitcoms, it can be stand-up comedy, anything. In most cases, you'll notice that there is a kind of a setup and there is a kind of a resolution. So in the setup stage, what happens is you are led to think something, and in the resolution stage, you understand that what you had thought was not appropriate. There was something wrong in that, and you need to take another view. So in case of jokes also, you'll notice that you will draw one meaning and later realize that the meaning you had drawn was not the applied meaning. Rather, there is some other possible meaning which is more applied, and that meaning is sometimes compatible, sometimes incompatible with the script. So that makes you laugh, and that is why a joke is successful. Now, when you are translating a joke, you may or may not have the option of polysemy and homonymy. That means the word that caused the word or the ambiguity that caused the experience of laughter in a joke may not be possible in the target language. So if something can be expressed in this way in a source language, there is a possibility. There is also a challenge to find similar kind of ambiguity or multiplicity of scripts in the target language. So in that case, what you should do is you can adopt a different joke which is of similar nature. Now here two things are important. One is several jokes have some kind of a universal structure. So if the joke is purely based on socio-cultural aspects, it may not be very difficult to transfer. If it is a purely say language manipulation, if it's a joke which has only language manipulation, for instance, you can have something like puns, then it is very difficult. Translating a pun is more difficult than translating a joke. So if you have, say, punning riddles, or if you have something like tongue twisters, these are all instances which create funniness, but they are more difficult than general jokes which have socio-cultural aspects, also political jokes, where you just have to replace the person's names, and then this remains as interesting as it was in the source language. In between, there are some other comments also. Do we have any opportunity to do the translation in NTM, and is there certification is available to get the global recognition for translators? We'll come back to your question, Balabhaskar. How can we translate proverbs? Proverbs are closely related with culture. When we translate them into another culture, what we should do to retain their meaning and flavor? Is there any technique? This is Sayani Hazra has asked a very important, very serious question. This is important for us to know that proverbs give a lot of challenge to the translators, but then we have equivalents of proverbs. We have discussed this before also. Like you have equivalents for some terms, you have equivalents for some words available in the target language. You also may have a similar or equivalent expressions or proverbs in the target language. At times, it may not come very accurately. At times, it may exceed also. But then there are possibilities if the context or if the two languages concerned represent a same kind of scenario. Like if you have languages of India, so more or less our cultural belongings are similar in nature, and the proverbs are available in varying in varying proportions. They are available in all these languages. So if a proverb of, say, Hindi is to be translated into Bangla, or if a proverb is to be translated from Malayalam to Tamil, or from Tamil to Kannada, or from Telugu to Kannada, I guess there are similar proverbs available. Sometimes there may be an absence, there may be a gap, then a proverb of similar weightage can be given. So in this case, you are not just searching for a word, you are searching for a string of words, and you are searching for a set of words which represent the same kind of context, which represent the same kind of a meaning. So these are like frozen expressions, and you cannot do much about these frozen expressions. We also have a question from Samuel Mong, where he has said he's asking how to handle when we encounter unknown ideas, concepts from one culture to another culture. These unknown ideas and concepts from one culture to another culture can have different connotations. One is the translator does not know the source language properly, source culture properly. So the translator is not aware of what those culture specific items would refer to. So then it is a difficulty because the message has not conveyed to the translator fully. And in the other context, it refers to the lack of knowledge on part of the target language. So though the translator would be translating in his or her own language, there is a possibility that he or she does not have a suitable context which is culturally fit or which expresses the source fully in the target. The second context is it is not possible to express because that would be offensive. Like we discussed in the previous interaction, that some items, some topics are easy to discuss in a language and not in all languages. So it is possible that it is possible to discuss these things in the source language, but it may be very difficult to discuss that in the target language, or it can be the other way around also. And that is why we have concepts of explicitation and implicitation or euphemism. Then we have another observation made by Anshuman Bora, where he observes that Gopal Gandhi's Hindi translation of Vikram Seth's novel, The Suitable Boy, is better than the English version. So Hindi translation is better. This happens in several cases. This can happen for two reasons. Your observation can be because you read the translation first and then the source, or it can be that the translator has had the advantage of reading the source and then expressing that in a very beautiful way and in a way that it exceeded the source text creative aspects. So these are like not very surprising. These are things that happen very regularly, and it should actually make us happy that the translation has appeared satisfactorily well. We move on to day 9, and Paulami Chakrabarti has asked, I was wondering if the fact that interpretation studies has taken a backseat in the academia is rooted in the idea that interpretation is the precursor to translation, and that is an interpreter is often expected to be a translator by default, or that the ultimate goal of interpretation is translation. This is something very interesting. Here, Paulami has suggested two diagonally opposite views. One is because interpretation has preceded translation, the world has seen interpretation before translation occurred here. Therefore, often it is seen that the interpreters are expected to become translators. This is true on some occasions, but not on all occasions. But then often interpreters are expected to also perform translation activities. That is one thing, and that is why interpreters are usually in the back seat. But then they are in the back seat not just because they are expected to be translators by default. Rather, our social attitude towards translation and interpretation has been faulty. We have always treated translation and interpretation as something, as a form of something, something as a copy of something. So we feel that the translated and interpreted text are forms and copies of the source text, which is original and has higher value. So as long as we have such a view, we may not be able to provide proper value to the translated or interpreted work. So we need to be careful with that. We need to understand that translators and interpreters are also creative people who are also skilled and who are providing you things of high intellectual value. Then we have Sri Krishna, who is asking to distinguish between sequential and simultaneous interpretation. I think we had discussed that. In case of sequential interpretation, a speaker speaks his content, then takes pause, and then the interpreter speaks the same content in the target language, and then takes a pause. Again, the speaker speaks and then takes a pause. The interpreter interprets that in the target language and then takes a pause. So it's a kind of a sequence where you have the source text in the oral form and the target text occurring side by side at just after it. In case of simultaneous interpretation, what happens is the speaker is speaking, and at the same time the interpreter is speaking the same content for the convenience of the hearers. So the interpreter can be sitting in a booth from where he or she is speaking on a mic, and the hearer is holding one headphone, and the content is appearing to him or her in the through the headphone in the target language. So that is happening simultaneously. It's called happening in real time. It's live, happening in the real time. That is why it's called simultaneous interpretation. Then we have the final question from Khalid M, and it is asking, machine-assisted translation can never be accurate. Several experts have said that. Is it true? Khalid's question is also very important because machine translation is something that has been challenging the human translation. but then we should see it as something that is enabler, and it is assisting human translation more than challenging it. And then once we have that kind of a view, we'll understand that machine translation is achievable and it is moving very fast in a positive direction. Of course, we have to spend a lot of time and we should show a lot of patience before it can become fully functional, before it is becoming fully reliable. We should understand that when humans are parsing a sentence, when humans try to understand language, they have some advantages. They know how to switch between contexts, they know how to swap meanings, they know how to disambiguate an expression. Machines are to be trained for that. Once they are trained, they will be able to perform very well. And we see that when machine translation was tried long ago, the performance was not very encouraging. But with time, the performance has been improving considerably. And with this kind of an indication, we can very well say that in future, machine translation would be able to perform much, much better than this. And our apprehensions or suspicion regarding machines' ability to translate satisfactorily would disappear slowly. There are several situations, there are several places where instant translation of academic text is happening and they are able to succeed quite well. So the problems are because of the nature of language that we have itself. Our languages are naturally designed in such a way that we will be able to speak ambiguous sentences even though we do not want them. So even if I want to be very direct and clear in my statements, there is a strong possibility that every statement I make would have some kind of an ambiguity. And because these sentences have ambiguities, they are open to interpretation. Several interpretations can be drawn from any statement that one makes. And that is why machines have to select the best option from a cohort of options available. And that is why machine translation is taking time to come up, but then it is growing fast. What we can do today is we make use of it. And when we are making use of it, simultaneously, we are adding to its databases, which it will use for future development. We also have another question from Selvi. Please explain, sir, in Transcendental Today Journal, only articles. We'll come to the journal. Any major action, Sneha is asking, any major or actions are practiced by NTM to control, improve quality of translation, interpretation, and other language-related tasks being handled? Yes, Sneha, yes, to your question, NTM has its own system of quality assurance. We have a vetting team, and any translation that we receive, before, even if it is a sample, we send the sample to experts, and the experts follow an interesting policy of no acceptance, no rejection directly. Rather, they provide suggestions which are to be incorporated for the best outcome of the translated work. And that is what is communicated to the person who has sent the sample. And once the person goes through the observations made by the reviewer, the person decides whether he or she would be able to follow this kind of translation or not. If yes, then they proceed with translation and an agreement is signed. Even after they have submitted their work in 25%, we usually ask them to submit the work in installments. And when we receive the works in installments, the team or the reviewers will go through the work and find out whether the translator is able to maintain what was suggested by the initial sample reviewer, or it requires some further changes. Even after the entire work is done, we conduct one workshop called vetting workshop, where the experts from subject as well as languages will come. Experts representing subjects and language will come, and then they would examine the entire text before it can be finalized. Because we are dealing with textbooks most often, or very important letters and communications from the ministry and other government agencies, we do not have the choice of allowing anything go wrong. So we do not have any scope for mistranslation, and we try our best to maintain quality there. Then we have some more questions, opportunities. Yes, Let me come to these other questions which I had left. But before that, Ashish has a question. Ashish has raised his hand. Let me ask Ashish what he would like to know.
So you are talking about machine translation.
Yes.
So, sir, similar to that, the application Grammarly is also having very complex issues. For example, when we put our article into Grammarly app, it did not catch up our argument, what we really want to convey. And as it is a completely technical application, it won't really respond positively.
Yes, I agree with you, Ashish, but let me remind you that Grammarly does not translate. Grammarly provides you only language correction facilities. So it provides you a service based on spelling and grammatical appropriateness. And if you also have the premium version, it will suggest you some words, some replacements based on the context of your writing. So and that too in a limited format, I guess 10 to 11 pages in a go, not more than that. So that is some kind of a tool based on AI, and it has like developed based on the grammars available for English. It works very well for English, and even if it is able to improve your text by say 20%, that can be called a significant achievement. Why? Because it is able to read and understand your text to some extent, and it's a machine. It is not a human being. Human beings' knowledge has been converted into computer programs, and those computer programs are parsing your text. They are analyzing your text in such a way that it is able to identify errors based on the norms of use. So in that settings, you can select British or American style of writing. In these settings, you can also select what type of writing it is, whether it is a letter or it is a research paper or it's an essay, things like that. Also you can, if it notices that you are repeatedly using a word, then it will say that there is repetition and you better change it. It is also able to identify punctuation errors, but all that is related to a particular language, that's English here, and we do not have such things for Indian languages at present. Our investment should go in that direction so that all of us are able to read and write, speak and use our languages correctly. Of course, those are machines and they can be misled at times. There are several sentences we experiment with Grammarly also, and we've noticed that it goes wrong in case of Grammarly there because it's mechanical treatment of the sentence you are giving. But then at the end, you should apply your own wisdom before you finalize a write-up. You should not completely depend on the machine. We now we would like to go back to other questions which were not taken up, like what are the basic softwares for translation work easily learned practice to English to Hindi and vice versa. This question I think I cannot answer. Then I have completed in NELTS and All India and Foreign Languages Institute of Hyderabad. Okay. Yes, there is a question from Uttara Durai Rajan. What are the opportunities to translate science textbooks from English to Indian languages through NTM? Whom should we contact? My request to you would be, please visit the National Translation Mission's website, and you have the contact available there. You can write to the mission, you can write to the project director, the email IDs and the postal address, both are given there. You select a text, write to them, ask whether that book which you have selected is available or not. There are two possibilities. One is NTM might have selected that book, but NTM does not have the copyright or translation rights for that book. So in that case, NTM would inform you that the book is not available at the moment because the rights are not there. The second possibility is the book is available, the rights are available, but it is assigned to somebody else. So in these two situations, you may not get that book. But otherwise, if you have shown interest in a particular book, you will be asked to submit a sample. So in that case, people like inquire about some titles which are available, and then immediately they send a sample of say 1 chapter or 10 pages or 25 pages, something like that, which can be sent for expert review. And the reviewers would say whether the translator has the required potential to translate or not. So that way it can be done. You visit the National Translation Mission's website and then see what text we are interested in and how you can associate with the mission. There are other contact email IDs also given there. Then from Manisha is asking from where I can learn Pali language. Is there any institute or any workshop, any course related to Pali? I think there are some institutions which I cannot name right now. I do not remember them, but you can find out on the net and learn those courses. I guess there is something available in Maharashtra. You'll have to inquire, search it online also. Then I think Bala Bhaskar's question regarding opportunities to do the translation in NTM, is there any certification? Certification we are not doing at the moment. Of course, for the workshop, we give you a certificate, but then certification here has an extended meaning. That means you become a licensed translator for a pair of languages, like you have medical doctors or other trained or professionals like advocates. So right now that is not available. But then maybe in a couple of years, either NTM or IITI or some other institution would come up providing licensing and certification facilities where you can go with a work of translation and say that this is my translation, can it be certified, and they can certify that. Or I am a translator, I have these skills. They would conduct a test like TOEFL or IELTS, and after you have qualified in that test, they will issue you a certificate or license to practice as a translator. So these are things which are developing slowly, and it may take some more time because it requires a lot of agencies to participate together. There are quality aspects which can be maintained not just by one institution, rather a couple of, or say 3 or 4 institutions would participate together to develop that kind of testing and certification process. Once that is done, then you will definitely have license to work anywhere, and then recognition will depend on the quality of work that you do. Then Sanjeev has a question on translating puns that we have already taken up. In case of puns, it is very difficult, but then there are papers which discuss what you can do to translate punning riddles and things like that. There is also a question by Selvi, and the question is on publication in Translation Today. If you please visit the Translation Today journal's website, and you will get to know everything. Most of your questions are answered there. You have a section called Q&A. If you click on them, you'll get to know. Yes, the journal mostly publishes articles in English. Okay, mostly publishes articles in English, but at the same time, the journal also publishes interviews and book reviews, to which I'll come at the end before we conclude, and that would be a good occasion to associate with Translation Today. I think there are no further questions. Khalid has raised his hand, so let me ask what Khalid would like to know.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tariq sir. Code switching and code mixing is an important, or say kind of a process which is having an impact on the languages, great impact. Are there any studies done how the translation is affected on with these processes?
This is something very interesting. Code mixing and code switching is more real than we think they are. In our day-to-day communication, we are hardly monolingual. Very often we switch and we mix codes. And when we have a source text available in code mixed form to be rendered in a target language, then what do we do? Do we allow code mixing in the target language also, or we go monolingual? These are very tricky questions, and I think the best thing would be to decide on the basis of what the person who has commissioned the work wants. So what is expected from the readers would help you decide whether you should allow code mixing in the target text or not. Sometimes code mixing is essential because of the kind of character portrayed. So if you read some works, you will notice in some novels like Maila Aanchal by Phanishwar Nath Renu, you will see that code mixing is shown to discuss the multilinguality or bilinguality in that region itself. So the characters are code mixing and switching between languages. That is how the author is trying to show that the whole area is multilingual in nature. Now, if that novel is to be translated in some other language, I am very sure code mixing and code switching should be retained there. But if it's just say discussion or of some academic work, some paper which for the purpose of simplicity code mixing has happened, and then it has to be translated into a different language, in that case I think code mixing can be avoided also. Now let me but code switching seems necessary in dubbing and subtitling. Dubbing and subtitling usually appears in a single code. There is no mixing and switching, except for those words which are accepted as a word of that language. So if the word mobile has to appear, it will appear as mobile only. So here you will have transliteration of the word and not translation. So that way code mixing or code switching within subtitling activities do happen. Now, since we have very little time, or say time has already got over, let me draw your attention to the point that I wanted to make before you, and as I had promised to you earlier also. I wanted to discuss our journal with you. You all are aware of Translation Today brought out by National Translation Mission. And I see that most of you are people doing serious studies. So my interest would be to encourage you to write for Translation Today, write good articles, and that can pass the publication review process. At the same time, there are few other possibilities also in this journal, and let us discuss them. One very interesting activity within Translation Today is publication of interviews. So I encourage you all to identify some very well-established translators or theoreticians who have discussed or who have good knowledge of translation studies or interpretation or adaptation for that matter. You discuss their work, have an interview over email, okay? If you wish, you can have a say in-person interview also, but then we would require a transcript of that interview. So if you submit the transcript of your interview with a scholar of eminence in the field of translation, interpretation, or adaptation, it can appear in the journal. This journal is well reputed, and it is also in the UGC care list. And if you are able to submit a very good interview with some professional translator or translation studies scholar who has contributed significantly in the area, then it can appear in Translation Today journal. Now, how would you know what kind of interviews are there? I will encourage you to have a look at our previous issues, and you will see what kind of interviews have. Yes, very good. Latika has suggested a very, very valuable name. Diaz Chintas is like pioneer in this field, especially in
Dr. Jorge Diaz Cintas.
Intrasemiotic.
Dr. Jorge Diaz Cintas.
Yes. He was in India, I think 3 to 4 years ago.
Yes, and we did his workshop. Yes, sir, in Hyderabad, CALS.
Yes, University of Hyderabad. So I think it would be good if you can send him a request for an interview and send us questions, but you get yourself acquainted with the kind of interviews that we have published. So once you see the kind of interview that we have published, you will know how to proceed with the work. You'll have to know the person and his work before you are approaching him for the interview, and send him or her some interesting questions for which he or she should reply either in audio format or text format. But what you are going to give to us is a text, a transcript, which can appear in the journal. And that is a very good way to actually draw people's attention to the works of some eminent scholars. So that's one avenue on which we all can collaborate in future. And I look forward to seeing some interviews from your side, number one. Number two, you can identify some recently published books in the area of translation studies, interpretation studies, or adaptation studies, or comparative literature, or cultural studies. Identify a book that would be relevant for translation today's themes, and then write a book review. So if you write a book review, it can also appear in the journal. Now let me tell you, without a repetition, that book reviews are the easiest things to get published, right? So one very easy way to get published is write book reviews. But let me say it as a word of caution that we do not publish anything that just comes to us. Our team is very, very firm on quality maintenance, and it will put your work for a very stringent check, and only after it meets the publication standards, it can be considered for publication, whether it is article, research article, or it is a book review, or it's an interview. But at the same time, I have a faith that you all are capable of taking up interviews and book reviews, and also research articles. You're capable of writing these, and I would look forward to receiving articles, book reviews, or interviews from your end. That's all from our side for the time being, and let us stop here so that we do not get fully tired and meet tomorrow again.
सर एक बात थी, मेरे पूछना था।
जी पूछिए।
हाँ सर, मेरा सवाल ये था, सवाल भी नहीं, थोड़ी जिज्ञासा है कि जैसे हमने देखा है कि कई सारी ऐसी मैगजीन्स विदेशों में निकलती है, लाइक पिन टू प्लेन अबाउट ट्रांसलेशन। ये होता है कि जैसे अब उद्योग जगत में ये होता है कि कई सारे प्रोडक्ट्स लॉन्च होते हैं, अनुवाद होता है उनका, तो उसके ऐसे केस स्टडीज आती हैं कि भाई देखिए एक अनुवाद करने पर वो प्रोडक्ट कहाँ ऊंचाइयों को छू गया, और ये मतलब हर चीज, अच्छा ट्रांसलेशन के जोक्स या फिर जो भी होगा, मतलब आप हर एक डोमेन में ले लीजिए, लेकिन वो सिर्फ संबंधित हो ट्रांसलेशन से। तो क्या इस तरह की ऐसी मनोरंजक भी हो, जो सीखने भी मिले, और जो बहुत ही मतलब ये हो, नहीं है कोई ऐसी सर? या फिर ना हो तो मैं कहती हूँ कि सर हमें शुरू करनी चाहिए सर।
धन्यवाद आपके प्रश्न के लिए, आपकी जिज्ञासा बड़ी ही उचित है, और इस संदर्भ में मैं कहना चाहूंगा कि इसका प्रावधान राष्ट्रीय अनुवाद मिशन में उपलब्ध है। आपने देखा होगा हमारे यहाँ एक ट्रांसलेशन बुलेटिन भी है, और ट्रांसलेशन बुलेटिन में हमने इसके लिए प्रावधान बनाया है कि अगर आपको अनुवाद करते समय कोई ऐसी परेशानी आए, कोई समस्या आए, या कोई ऐसा विचार आपके मन में आए जिसको कि आप दूसरे लोगों के साथ में साझा करना चाहेंगे, तो आप कर सकते हैं। तो मैं आपको निमंत्रण दूंगा कि आप एक बार ट्रांसलेशन बुलेटिन को भी देखें, लेकिन साथ साथ मैं ये भी बताना चाहूंगा, एंड फॉर द कन्वीनियंस ऑफ ऑल अदर पार्टिसिपेंट्स, लेट मी say it very clearly that the translation bulletin that we bring out is a kind of a newsletter. So it will not give you academic weightage. Whereas if you publish in the journal, which is UGC Care List journal, then you get academic weightage for the purpose of completing your thesis, for the purpose of promotion in your job, for the purpose of getting admissions and things like that. So that is one very different kind of an area. Let me come back to the question of Latika once again. There have been several queries regarding why translation today does not publish translated works. As a journal of translation brought out by National Translation Mission, it should also bring out translations. And several people discussed it with us on several occasions. They fought with us, in fact, and then we were just trying to find out a way to accommodate translations in our journal. Then we came up with an idea of like why we bring out a journal. So our intention was to publish cutting edge research. Something that is known to all, something that has become a common wisdom was not that important, or not as important as something that is new to the people, and that is what is to lead the direction of thought in future. So that is why we maintained our norm, but created a small scope for publication, for the publication of translated work also with translator's note. So we can include 1 or 2 translations in every issue with translator's note, and the note should be academic in nature. It cannot be that I found this work very interesting and that is why I have translated. No, it should be a note focusing on what challenges one faced in the process of translation and how the translator overcame that problem, so that some translators would further draw from it. So that way there is a scope for the publication of translated work in translation today also, but that scope is limited at the moment. We are also thinking about bringing out some kind of a volume where there is a lot of translations in several languages. Okay, and then there are other discussions also, but then that would take a lot of time, because one has to deal with several languages and fonts and scripts in the process, and then it should also be in a form that you would appreciate. It just cannot be a bundle of things together. So with these words, I think we should stop here. If there is any question that has remained unanswered, let us take them up on some other occasion, in some other platform.
Bye.
Sir, I have a question, please.
Saini, you still have a question? Okay.
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, I want to know that if I make translation as my profession, my prime profession, so what should I do to?
If you are making science translation.
Translation as my profession. Actually, I am novice in this field, though I have done some translation professionally, but those are what should I call that? Those are much more freelance work. But
Right.
I want to take this translation as my serious and prime profession. So what should I do, and how can I improve my skills? So if you please advise me.
To hear this from you, Saini. Can you also tell us what language pairs you are comfortable with?
Sir, I am much more. I'm comfortable with Bangla and English, and I am learning Spanish right now, and I want to learn some other also. I want to learn. I have a plan to learn some Indian languages.
Muy
But,
bien, muy
right
bien,
now?
muy bien, Saini.
Yes. Sorry.
Muy bien, qué bien.
Yes. Sí, muy bien. Gracias.
Gracias. Let me tell you, this is a very important thing you have raised. Let me bring this to the information of everyone here, that National Translation Mission has a register called National Register of Translators. I hope you all have enrolled yourself there, right? So if
No,
not,
sir, no.
okay.
No,
So if
sir.
not, let me tell you that you can, as per your convenience, enroll with the National Register of Translators. You just have to go to NTM website, then click on National Register of Translators. If it is allowing online submission of form, do that. Otherwise, write to us with all your details, and our teams will get back to you. So once you have registered there, the teams would occasionally contact you for work. Okay, there are several possibilities. Like if you want to seriously consider translation as your career, it is rather good, because there is a dearth of quality translators in the field. And if you are proficient in 2 languages, and if your translation skills are good, you will have a lot of work. So you don't worry about that. one good way to begin is to get in touch with some agency first, receive some assignments, complete those assignments, and establish your name in the market first. The second thing would be to establish your own companies also. Okay, you can also establish your own firms which will provide translation services, but that would be good if you yourself establish first and you see the challenges on your own, and then develop a team of translators. And today I'm telling it to you here that my team would get in touch with you very soon, because the language pair that you know is of immense demand. Okay, so hopefully my team will get in touch with you very quickly, within maybe 2 to 3 days itself. All right.
Sir, thank you. Sir, thank you so much. But sir, are there any agencies like that, those who hire translators?
There are several, but they are available as private companies, and if you do search, you will get to know. Occasionally we can discuss these things separately also, so there is no problem in that. There are so many agencies, not just one or two. And then you can also get in touch with the National Translation Mission and inform the mission that you can translate some work, and you can receive work from the National Translation Mission also.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. And sir, these 2 weeks training program is immense. This is very helpful for me, at least. But sir, do NTM or conduct any further or detailed course on translation?
Yes, we usually conduct 3-week-long in-house residential program, where people attending the course will be assigned some translations, and they would be made to do some translation. In past, people have completed entire books in 21 days time. So that was not possible due to the prevailing COVID situation. That is why we had to go online. But we look forward to holding such programs in future. And if that happens, you all can come and attend it again. That's one thing. Here Ashraf informs that he has also translated Hindu's Frontline article and published it in Malayalam newspaper. Very interesting. Very interesting. Ashraf, I will say this to everyone present here. Please visit the National Register of Translators and then get in touch with National Translation Mission. If you are able to register there, you can be contacted for work. There are several occasions when NTM is looking for some good translators who can translate reliably and timely. So there and also online. So there are occasions in which we have a pool of translators who are elderly people, not very comfortable on computers, do not know typing. So there you have an advantage. You are people who can type also in your language, and you know the value of maintaining time in the enterprise of translation. Here, like, it matters a lot. So whatever is to be completed within the time frame has to be completed within the time frame. There is no way out. So that if you can maintain, please get in touch with NTM team. Of course, the training team is different. There will be some other team interacting with you for those things. Okay, but drop us an email. Our teams will coordinate that. All right. Manisha has also raised her hand. Manisha?
Yes, sir. I want to ask us one thing. Like, suppose we translate Ghazal, so what kind of problems we face? Like, there are all things like rhythm, rhyme, and sense. These all things are very important. So, if we translate Ghazal, then what kind of, how can we improve that?
I do not find myself very well placed to answer your question, but then I will try. And my suggestion in this case would be to just see whether the person who is translating has any taste for ghazal or not. And only if the person is able to or the person has some good taste for poetry, and especially this form of poetry called ghazal, then
Okay.
he or she should get into the translation of that. Secondly, these works are such that there can be varying opinions of people. So the work should also be shown to some other people for their opinion. And after that, the main purpose of like getting the message communicated in the design and style required, that should be done. So the person should be like poetic. Unless one is poetic, one cannot become a translator of ghazals.
Okay, because when I write ghazals, but actually I do the translation Hindi to French or Hindi English to French, these all things. So I was thinking like if it is like similar English to French, or there will be some difficulties like Hindi to French if we will translate some ghazals. So I think there will be some problems.
This is also a difficult question to answer because neither I know French very well nor I know English very well. So the translation between English and French, I do not know how well one can do that. But ghazal is a form of poetry which is very popular in Urdu and Persian context.
Yes,
And
yes.
if you observe it carefully, the metrical nature of this poetry will have some kind of will pose some kind of a challenge if you were to translate this in English or French, because English sonnets are different from ghazals.
Yes.
So the nature of ghazal that you see and the kind of iambic parameter you maintain in English poetry are not one and the same. But then at the same time, you have some liberty there, and you have a choice to make between whether you want the source text or the author to be in peace, or you want the reader to be in peace. So once you have made the choice between these two, I think you can proceed with that.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Uttara Durai Rajan, I'm a science communicator, physics professor, and completed translation of HBCAC Vigyan Pratibha Science worksheets. Very happy to know Professor Uttara Durai Rajan. It's our honor that you were part of this program and contributed to it immensely by joining us. And since you have already translated works of science, please get registered with NTM. Our teams will get in touch with you because there are several materials of science and technology. They are in need of translators. And I think if your translation quality matches our requirements, we can take up some serious textbooks also for translation. So I'll request my team also to get in touch with you, and I'll also request you to get in touch with our team so that we have some future meaningful and serious and meaningful interactions and collaborative works also. Thank you.